Hey everyone, hear me okay? All right, so I'm Mooneer Salem, K6AQ. I'm going to talk a little bit about the EZDV device. A little bit about myself, licensed since the early 2000s, original call sign being KG6AOV. Do a lot of software development. In my day job, I work for a medical device company, C and C++ development there, and a little bit of C# and other stuff as well. And then I do a lot of open source stuff as well. FreeDV and of course EZDV being the biggest things I'm working on right now. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what FreeDV is, it's basically an open source HF digital voice mode, and it uses a codec called Codec 2. And this codec was created by David Rowe, VK5DGR. And typically people either use the FreeDV application, which you can get at freedv.org, or a hardware device such as EZDV or the SM1000. And if you want to find out a lot more about FreeDV, you can come to our booth, 1909. Or I'm also giving a talk tomorrow in a digital modes forum at 9:15 a.m. So EZDV is basically a handheld device. And inside that device has an ESP32 S3 microcontroller. And the nice thing about the ESP32 is it has Wi-Fi built in, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. But EZDV supports several of the FreeDV modes, 700 D and E, 1600, as well as the ability to just do analog pass-through, so you can just treat this as like just a normal sideband microphone effectively. And it also has a battery in it, and 2,000 milliamp hour. In my experience, it typically lasts for most, if not all day. But if you happen to run out of battery while you're, say, doing like a Poto or Soto with it, for example, then there's a USB-C on the bottom. Charge is pretty straightforward with any sort of USB brick. And I talked a little bit about the Wi-Fi support. The nice thing about the Wi-Fi support is that we can basically use that Wi-Fi support to do cat control and audio input and output with the radios, with certain radios that it supports. Right now we support the Flex 6000 series. I guess the 8000 series hopefully as well, since Flex just announced that yesterday. And the ICOM 705 as well. And then with Flex in particular, the analog audio will also route through Smart SDR. So in effect, it looks like a mode that's built into the radio already, as you can see in the screenshot up there. And Wi-Fi support also allows some certain internet connectivity features, such as reporting to our official spotting service called FreeDV Reporter. And you can go to qso.freedv.org right now and take a look at the live activity of FreeDV. But of course, you don't actually need internet to use EZDV. It's just a nice to have thing if you do happen to have internet access wherever you are. And we also have some additional like Flex specific features. As you may know, the Flex has a spotting feature where it will actually, if you're running a program that supports it, it will actually put the call sign of the spot in the Smart SDR waterfall. And an example of that is in the water on the slide up there. And it's pretty useful if you just stepped away from the computer for a minute and you were hearing FreeDV going off in the background. You'd be able to pick up who was trying to like transmit and maybe be able to call them back. And in addition, because we spent a lot of time integrating with Flex, there's setup of the Flex support inside EZDV is actually pretty straightforward. It's effectively you just select your radio from a list and choose save. So hopefully you guys want to buy an EZDV. Tapper is actually selling them right now at their booth in 5009 through 5011. And if you don't happen to be able to get one during Hamvention, or if you want to buy a second one later, you can go to the Tapper shop online and just order it online. And when you order or pick one up, you get the board itself, a battery, and the enclosure. So once you have your EZDV, there's a few ways you can do setup. The one way is if you have a wired connection to your radio. What you would basically do is you would make up a cable that goes into this 3.5 millimeter jack right here, and it's a 4-conductor jack, TRRS. And the tip is basically transmit audio from EZDV to your radio. And then the first ring is push to talk, and the second ring is ground, and then the sleeve is basically the receive audio from your radio. So kind of similar to how a wired headset would be, except for the presence of the PTT, of course. And if you happen to be using a radio that provides that option, I recommend just doing 1200 baud mode. There's not that many radios out there that have that option. 817 is one example, and ICOM 7100, I believe, too. The FreeDV HF modes don't really need the extra capability of the 9600 baud, so it's not really necessary. And then, of course, you don't have to make up a cable if you're going to be using Wi-Fi for your connection to the radio. And then you will need to typically have a wired headset, and you would plug that into the other side, the other 3.5mm jack. And EZDV uses the Android wired headset standard, so basically tip in the first ring are the receive audio, second ring is ground, and then the sleep is the transmit audio. And of course, if you're using a flex radio, you don't need to do that. The audio goes through Smart SDR, so that's actually pretty nice. And if you are setting up Wi-Fi, by default, EZDV has Wi-Fi disabled, mainly for security. But in order to enable it, it's pretty straightforward. You just go ahead and hold down the mode and volume down buttons for a couple seconds. And what that basically does is it enables a so-called recovery Wi-Fi configuration. That is, it basically creates an access point called EZDV with like letters and numbers at the end, and those letters and numbers are going to depend on the particular EZDV device you have. And then once that network shows up, you would basically just connect to it with your computer or phone, and then go to 192.168.4.1 in your browser. And then once you're on the web interface, you'd basically go in to the Wi-Fi tab, and you'd basically configure it for your network. You can go ahead and either select the Wi-Fi network that it sees. Just one thing, EZDV only supports 2.4 gig Wi-Fi. So if you happen to be running a Wi-Fi router that only supports 5 gig, or you turned off 2.4 for whatever reason, it's not going to show up on here. I also recommend you choose a network with internet access to get full functionality, but of course, as I mentioned, you don't need Wi-Fi to be able to use EZDV. Another way you can set up EZDV as well is you can have it create the network for you, kind of similar to that, excuse me, the recovery Wi-Fi configuration. You can just call it something else instead of EZDV letters and numbers. And in order to do that, you can just go to access point mode instead of client mode. And of course, once you make Wi-Fi changes, those only take effect on next startup. So you have to push and hold mode for a couple seconds, turn it off, and then push and hold mode again for a couple seconds, turn it back on again. Or you can push the reboot tab button inside the general tab. And then once you have your Wi-Fi set up, if you're going to be using a 705 or a Flex radio, you can go to the radio tab and configure for your radio. And in this example, I selected the Flex 6000 series, and I selected my Flex at home in the radio dropdown. And of course, if you have multiple Flex radios, it will auto-detect those, and you can choose whichever radio you want to associate your EZDV with. And again, like the Wi-Fi settings, the radio settings only take effect on next reboot, so you have to power cycle it again. And a lot more information on setting up Wi-Fi and radio configuration is in the EZDV user guide. So I really recommend setting up the reporting. This is what gets you showing up on the FreeDV reporter, so that other people can see what you're doing and if you're able to hear anyone and whether you're transmitting, for example. In order to do that, you just go to the reporting tab, and then just enter your call sign and grid score pretty much, and you're good to go. There's also a message field you can type in, just a custom message. You can even log in like live while it's running and change the message, and it will auto update on FreeDV Reporter without having to reboot. And then EZDV also has a voice queue functionality. And in order to enable that, you can just go to the voice queue tab and upload a WAV file. And the WAV file has to be 8 kilohertz sample rate with only one channel. Reason for that is I didn't really want to have to resample the audio coming from that. The ESP32 does have enough performance to be able to do that, but I figured to keep it simple initially, just to force 8 kilohertz sample rate. And inside the voice queue options as well, you can configure how many times it's going to transmit that voice queue file and how many seconds to wait between each transmission. So something that's really important to set up is the transmit audio level. FreeDV behaves similarly to other digital modes in that you don't want ALC to indicate on your transceiver. And it's pretty simple to adjust the transmit audio level. Basically, turn it on and then push the talk button while you're pushing the volume up and volume down buttons. And you basically just do that until ALC no longer indicates. And what that looks like is going to depend on your radio. I know Elecraft, for example, on the KX3 needs to be like 3 or 4 bars in order for everything to be okay. Whereas with other radios, you don't want ALC to show up at all. But you don't need to do this with the Flex radios because it uses a fixed transmit level that was already optimized, so no need to do that there. So once you have everything set up, operation's pretty straightforward. There's 4 buttons. So push-to-talk mode, volume up and volume down, and as well as 4 LEDs. The push-to-talk LED means that, just like how it sounds, EZDV is transmitting. And then the sync one means that it's actually able to decode a FreeDV signal. And then overload means that maybe your audio levels are too high or you're speaking too loudly. Kind of an indication that you need to back off a little bit. And then finally, the bottom LED is the network LED. And the way that the network LED works is if it's blinking, that means it is connected to a Wi-Fi network. And if it's solid, that means it's connected to the radio. And when you push the mode button, it will cycle between the available FreeDV modes, currently 700D, E1600, and analog pass-through. When you first get the EZDV, it will default to 700D. But if you switch to another mode and then turn it off and turn it back on again, it will come back to whatever mode you were using before. And as I've mentioned, if you push and hold the mode button for more than 1 second, it will either turn on or turn off EZDV. And push-to-talk basically puts the radio and EZDV itself in the transmit mode. And if you have the voice keyer set up, if you hold the push-to-talk and then push the mode button, it will, and then let go of the PTT button, it will actually kick off the voice keyer. And if you're using a Flex radio, the MOX button in Smart SDR, or if you have a microphone plugged into your radio, pushing the push-to-talk on the microphone will actually put EZDV in the transmit as well. And volume up and down also, as well as adjusting transmit volume, adjust the receive audio. But you don't need to hold down push-to-talk for that, just push volume up and down. And as mentioned, there are basically no volume controls if you're using a Flex. All of that's controlled in Smart SDR. So once when you're operating, there's some web stuff that you can do in the web interface while it's running. The general tab is where you would manipulate all that. For instance, you can change the mode that you're currently running without having to push the mode button. And you can kick off the voice keyer that way as well as reboot. And it's really nice if you're using a Flex radio because you can VPN into your home, for example, and just go to the web page for EZDV and control it while you have Smart SDR running. So one more thing is firmware updates. Occasionally there will be firmware updates to add features or fix bugs. The firmware is posted to the project's GitHub, github.com/tmiw/EZDV. And that information is on the product page on the Tapper listing for EZDV as well. And once you have the firmware file, you'll want to go to the firmware update tab, choose that file that you downloaded from, and then upload it. And once it uploads, then power cycling it will cause a new firmware to take effect. And that's pretty much all I have on EZDV. I'm going to be going between the FreeDV booth in 1909 and Tapper booth, and I'll be around this weekend. But if you don't happen to reach out to me during then, my email is mooneer@gmail.com, or you can go on to the FreeDV Discord, and my username is The Mind Is Watching, and my username on GitHub is TMIW as well. And if you have any questions, the EZDV user guide is a really good resource to look at how to operate FreeDV, or EZDV rather. And that's also linked on the Tapper product page for EZDV. So I think I have a little bit of time for questions. Any questions?
There you go. Thank you. What is the advantage of using EZDV over using just the software on the PC?
So the advantage of using EZDV over the software is traditionally with the software, if you have to have a computer, right? So if you want to do a POTO or SOTA with EZDV, for example, or you would just want to operate portable in general, you normally would have to carry your computer around with you, or like a laptop, and that's one more thing you got to keep charged. Of course, you got to keep this charged too, but it's a lot smaller and it takes a lot less power than a laptop, for example. So having EZDV with you in addition to having the software running, or even just instead of the software, means it's less stuff you got to carry around if you got to go portable. And there's a lot of people who just don't like installing like dealing with anything computer related, so they'd rather have something they can set up once and like just run connected to the radio pretty much.
All right, thank you.